What's good, beautiful people? I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about 5 key pros of becoming an independent consultant. Now, I've been consulting or contracting for the past 4.5 years. I've done inside of IR35 roles initially, and I've moved on to the outside IR35 plane. Now, of course, I'm not going to say I'm going to be doing outside IR35 forever because things could happen. I'm not going to pretend as if it's something that's just quite easy because I understand the markets are quite different. However, within the capacity I'm in right now, it's been fantastic, and I kind of want to highlight the different pros that you can expect to see if you are going down this path or considering it at least anyway. So the first thing I want to say is that there is higher levels of freedom and flexibility. So the thing that sort of distinguishes, I guess, an outside IR35 contractor, which is to me is deemed an independent consultant, is the fact that there are 5 conditions that you need to meet, and I need to remember these off the top of my head. So the first thing is that you don't have anyone that you're reporting to in that way. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't communicate with individuals or you don't deliver on different deliverables, etc., etc. But even the language I'm using, you can tell that it's not the same setup. So you don't have a direct line manager, but you're working with either other consultants or the end client. The end client being the organization or business that you're working to. Okay. And so typically, because you would write a proposal and all this kind of stuff there, either through an agency or independently, you're trying to hit those deliverables. The second thing to say is that you have to provide your own resources. So whether that is your own mobile phone, your own laptop, all of this kind of stuff there, meeting rooms, you do that yourself. But with a lot of these different types of roles, it's remote, especially if you're a knowledge worker, so to speak. So I'm a program management consultant. I don't need to be in office all the time. However, there is obviously great opportunity to meet up with other contractors or other consultants, or even the end clients as well, to basically brainstorm, flesh out ideas, workshop stuff, etc., etc. So that's another thing to bear in mind. I guess the third thing is you don't have to work at a specific time, okay? And what I mean by that is, rather than saying, oh, I work 9 to 5, if you do that, that's by choice, but you don't have to do it that way. But this is the caveat I want to make. You have to understand how you're going to manage your work. And this is why being an expert is important when it comes to working out how much time is required for you to deliver on a specific task, okay? Or deliverable or whatever it may be. So you may work within the confinements of the 9 to 5, but you're not mandated to by contract. You're just not. So that's why it's different in that case. And when it comes to holiday and everything else, you get to decide when you want holiday. Of course, in your mind, you'd be thinking it needs to be in reason based on what I need to deliver. Okay. So if you want to take time off for the afternoon, you can do that. If you want to take off a week, you can do that. But mind you, it all depends on your relationship and the culture that you've established and embedded in terms of the boundaries that you put in place as a consultant. That's the other thing I'd say. I said there was 5 things. I don't remember the other 2. I think another one is you're able to subcontract other individuals. So really and truly, if there was a piece of work that needs to be done under your limited company, because the limited company is contracted, not you, then you can bring someone in to do that work, and then you can develop a gentleman's agreement or contract or whatever it may be to get that work set up and developed underneath your business. Okay. Of course, if you're under an agency, then you have to read the terms and conditions of the contract that you set up between you and the agency to see if that also fits as well. And I said there were 5, but I don't remember the 5th one. So if it comes to mind, I'll let you know. But that's it. Liability. So you are liable for anything that goes wrong based on what you've promised when it comes to your deliverables. Okay. So this is why it's important to get business insurance. I should have a link below by Kingsbridge. But business insurance covers you for things like professional indemnity, public liability. So professional indemnity is all centered around, I think at least anyway, just making sure you protect yourself when it comes to your code of conduct as being a professional, and public liability is just in case you do anything crazy in public and you're covered. Okay. And there are certain limits that you need to cover when it comes to this stuff. These business insurances range from like £250 to like £1,000, depending on what you need. So bear all this stuff in mind. So those are the things to think about. If you basically cover all 5 of those things, then that freedom and autonomous element is more of a cause or case when it comes to you being an outside IR35 contractor, which is independent consulting, in the UK at least anyway. The other thing I want to say is that you have a higher earning potential. You most definitely do. I would say that, if you're doing a certain role within a 9 to 5 and, you get paid £55,000, whatever it may be, I would say depending on the organization, depending on what you're doing, you could get paid anywhere between 1.2 to 2.5 times what you would expect to get paid. Now, the caveat with that is, okay, I want to be very clear, is that as a consultant, you're not going to be working every single day. And of course, when you don't work, you don't get paid. That's how it works. Unless you get a block payment, then it's different. And so if you're on a day rate, as an example, which most consultants will be on, and of course, there are other sort of ways to get paid, but we can talk about that later, then you won't get paid for going on holiday. So really what I do is, if I know my contract is for 12 months, okay, I will have that figure, times it by, I work out the daily rate, not even the daily rate, I'd work out the monthly rate, okay, and then times that by 12, and whatever figure I get, I times by 75%, roughly. And you can calculate what 75% looks like in terms of working days and all that kind of stuff there to give you an idea of what is more realistic. You may be more 85%, you may be more 65%, but it gives me an idea because I'm not going to make 100% of that money because it means I'd have to be in all the time. And that isn't the case. That's for a day rate example. But the other thing to say is that there are some instances, depending on what type of consulting you're doing, and I've spoken about this in terms of procurement style type consulting or freelance style type consulting. If you get paid based on value, okay, and let's say you get 50k for 3 months, like work or whatever it may be, then of course it's different. You can decide how you manage that, and you will know how much time is required to deliver on it. And sometimes you don't know. And this is why you have to have really good, deep conversations with the individual. And it's not because you're not an expert. Just because you're an expert doesn't mean you're going to know the ins and outs of the culture of the organization. Your expertise will be based on understanding a process, being great at delineating and chunking down information in a way that can be implemented and can be effective, creating that those tangible benefits, whether that is efficiencies, effectiveness, value, whatever that looks like. You have to be able to quantify this stuff. And so being really good at determining what good value looks like is really important. Okay, so that's the other thing I want to note. Also, you can take on more contracts if you want to. And I say that, but again, I'm always going to add a caveat. Do you really want to do that? I mean, if you're a freelance consultant and, you've been able to proportion your work a certain way and price yourself the right way, then of course it makes sense to do that. Maybe you have some big contracts and then smaller ones. And so the way you do this is you kind of like vary how you find contracts. Whether this is through a recruiter, whether this is freelance, whether this is through workshopping or VC-backed organizations or startups, whether this is via marketplaces, whether this is via word of mouth, whatever it may be. But sometimes taking on more contracts is not a sensible thing to do, especially if you're starting out. Even if you're not starting out, if you've got an intensive contract that you're on, you don't want all that wahala of dealing with someone else. That's long. It is long. So this is why I rarely do multiple contracts that are of the same nature. And I do more other stuff like the strategy sessions or the advisory stuff things centered around that requires my time here and there and gives me boosts of income. Of course, when my business naturally changes, where let's say, for example, I bring on more people or wherever it may be, different story altogether. So higher earning potential is the key word. You tend to make more, but of course you have to balance that with the rough and smooth, because if an economy changes, or if there are drivers that change the direction of your market, which has happened to me before, then you may be out of work. So you may not make money for a long period of time, but that is unlikely to happen if you know your market well. This is why I'm saying, like, you need to have experience in what you're doing if you want to decide to get into this whole consulting or contracting space. There's also this idea of diverse and more meaningful work. And I say that in quotation marks. That isn't a complete truism. And I say that because even though you're doing a permanent 9 to 5 potentially, it doesn't mean that your work isn't diverse or meaningful. So we got firm consultants who definitely have diverse work. Meaningful, they may say no, but some may say yes. Even if you're not part of a consulting firm, you still may exercise some of these different benefits as well. But the reason why I highlight this as a benefit is because you're more likely going to get this as an independent consultant, because you have the freedom to choose what you want. Some people just pick things because they're scared that they won't get a contract, and that shouldn't be the way you do it. It's difficult, man, because obviously if you need money, you need money. So sometimes you may have to do it here and there. But, touch wood, I personally haven't had to do that, even if it meant not being in work for a couple of months. So with that in mind, you get to choose what you want to do. And so that means you can, like, if you feel it's more meaningful, that's naturally a productivity hack, because you're going to put more of your effort and muscle fibers into it and brain cells, as opposed to just kind of doing something, So there is that to bear in mind as well. And so with this, it may stretch you and actually provide you with more opportunities to have solid things to put in your portfolio and or CV. So this is why it's a good look. The other thing I want to highlight is direct client relationships. So of course this is slightly different, but you're going to meet different types of people depending on what type of things you're doing. So for example, if you get into a program of some sorts, you may meet, or you will meet, the senior responsible officer, so the SRO. So that's the main person who's accountable for the whole program. You may meet the hiring manager, who may not be the SRO, someone else who actually brought you in, did the paperwork, all that kind of stuff there. You'll obviously have a relationship with other partners and or end clients, okay, or other consultants, who again allows you to develop great sort of like stakeholder engagement and all that kind of stuff there, but you have direct relationship access. And so really and truly, it means that you can find opportunities to find more work potentially, and just truly understand how you can position yourself better. You have that direct relationship, which is a positive thing. And you may not necessarily get that as much if you're in a 9 to 5, but of course those people who are excelling within the space, they've been able to do that because whether we agree with it or not, nepotism is a thing. Hey, listen, I've seen some stuff. It's crazy. It is a thing. So to put yourself in that situation, especially as a consultant or contractor, or even a 9 to 5er, because it doesn't really matter. It's all the same. Some people try to sort of like push consultants and contractors within this space. Nah, really and truly, they're characterizing what some of the bigger firms have done, and that's cascaded into these smaller ones, which it's not the same. But this is a thing. So that's one of the opportunities, direct client access. And another thing is, you get to really own your lane. You get to really own your brand and your legacy, or whatever you want to call it. And so brand is everything within this day and age, within this 21st century. As a portfolio careerist within the consulting space, and I believe that is almost the mindset that people have to start adopting, especially because of this cracked economy, your brand is going to be really important. And it has been very important. I note that when I enter different contracts and stuff, if people have looked me up or whatever it may be, they will note my LinkedIn, or well, they haven't said my YouTube yet, but LinkedIn's the first thing they go to. And they'll be like, oh, you do a bit of coaching here and da da da, and you're very active and blah. I mean, it's almost like I like this person based on what they talk about and stuff, because I'm talking about stuff that either relates to the working person or relates to the industry of program management or consulting or whatever it may be. And so it gives me a bit of an edge. Now, does everyone have to start posting it? No. No, they don't. Your brand is more than just the online presence. It is the work that you've done. It's how you delivered your work. It's your philosophy. It's how you present yourself. It's your mindset. It's your conversational skills. It's what you've actually delivered on. It's your CV. It's your supporting statement. It's your website. It's the LinkedIns. It's all of it. It's your associations. So lean onto the ones that make sense for you and try to work out what has worked for you in the past. That's where the benefit comes into play. And so these are the 5 key things that come to mind when it comes to benefits as a consultant / contractor independently. So hopefully this has been useful. If you want to see more videos centered around contracting, consulting, portfolio careers, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.